Imagine this: a powerful prophecy, delivered with confidence and conviction, promises that a church devastated by Hurricane Beryl will be fully rebuilt in just 4 months. The congregation celebrates, hope soars, and faith is tested. But now, 1 full year has passed, and the promise remains unfulfilled. What really happened? Did the prophecy fail, or is there a deeper message that's being overlooked? Today, we're taking a closer look at Pastor Keion Henderson's bold declaration, the aftermath, and what this means for believers who place their trust in his word. You won't believe the details that have come to light and what it could reveal about prophecy, faith, and accountability in the modern church. When Pastor Keion Henderson stood before his congregation in the aftermath of Hurricane Beryl, his words carried a weight that electrified the room. With unwavering conviction, he declared that the church, battered, damaged, and in desperate need of restoration, would be fully rebuilt in just 4 months. For many members, it was more than a prophecy. It was a lifeline. Hope was restored in hearts that had been shaken by the storm, and faith was reignited. At that moment, believers clung to his vision, believing that divine timing and divine favor would align perfectly to make this promise a reality. Donations flowed, volunteers rallied, and the community braced for a miraculous turnaround. Social media buzzed with excitement. The story seemed destined to become a modern testament to faith, resilience, and the power of prophetic words. But as months passed, the rebuilding process lagged, expectations were met with delays, and anticipation gave way to confusion. By the time 1 year had passed, the church remained unfinished, far from the 4-month timeline that had been publicly proclaimed. Questions began to surface. Was the prophecy misunderstood? Was there a miscalculation? Or was faith being tested in ways no one anticipated? In this video, we will explore every angle of this unfolding story. We'll look at the initial prophecy, the responses from church members, the logistical and practical challenges that may have slowed the rebuilding, and the spiritual implications of an unfulfilled word. We'll ask difficult questions that many hesitate to confront openly. What does it mean when a prophecy does not come to pass? How do believers reconcile their trust in spiritual leaders with the reality of unmet promises? And most importantly, what lessons can we learn from this situation about faith, accountability, and discernment in modern church leadership? By the end of this story, you'll see that the narrative is more complex than it first appears. It's not just about a prophecy that failed to materialize. It's about expectations, leadership, trust, and the delicate balance between divine promise and human responsibility. And as we peel back the layers, you'll discover details that have remained largely unspoken. The insider perspectives, the reactions of the congregation, and the subtle signs that foreshadowed the challenges to come. But what happened in the months after the prophecy changed everything in ways that many never expected. After Hurricane Beryl's devastating impact, Pastor Keion Henderson's prophecy quickly became the focal point of his congregation's hope. Standing on the rubble of the damaged church, he confidently declared that within 4 months the church would rise again, fully restored, vibrant, and stronger than ever. The congregation cheered, donations were pledged, volunteers mobilized. The community, battered by the storm, embraced the prophecy as a beacon of faith. In the first weeks, everything seemed aligned with Henderson's words. Construction plans were drawn, budgets were discussed, and teams were assigned. Church members spoke with pride and hope on social media, sharing images of meetings, fundraising events, and planning sessions. Local news outlets covered the prophecy, amplifying both its reach and its emotional impact. People beyond the congregation began to take notice, intrigued by the confidence of a spiritual leader, promising a rapid recovery in the face of overwhelming odds. But as the weeks turned into months, cracks began to appear, not in faith, but in execution. Logistical challenges emerged, construction permits delayed, funding inconsistencies arose, and external contractors reported unexpected issues with the site. For some, these were minor setbacks, easily explained. For others, they were early warning signs that the prophecy might not unfold as swiftly as promised. By the second month, momentum slowed. The initial excitement faded, replaced by whispered concerns among church members. Social media posts shifted from excitement to frustration, with some expressing disappointment over the pace of progress. Questions started to surface. Was the prophecy literal or symbolic? Was the timeline meant to be exact or a general indication of God's favor? By the fourth month, when the prophecy was supposed to be fulfilled, the church was far from completion. The foundation had been laid, but walls remained incomplete. Volunteers worked tirelessly. Yet the vision of a fully restored church within 4 months seemed increasingly unlikely. This gap between expectation and reality created tension within the congregation. Members who had invested financially, emotionally, and spiritually felt a mix of confusion, disappointment, and doubt. What makes this story even more complex is the way the prophecy was communicated. Henderson delivered it with absolute certainty, leaving little room for interpretation. For many believers, prophetic words from a respected pastor are not just suggestions. They are promises grounded in divine authority. The contrast between the expectation and the reality forced church members into a difficult place. How do you reconcile faith in God with faith in a human messenger when the words do not come to pass? By 6 months, observers outside the congregation began commenting. Faith forums, social media groups, and local news outlets dissected the prophecy. Some defended Henderson, arguing that divine timing cannot be rushed and that miracles do not adhere to human schedules. Others criticized the leadership, suggesting that overconfidence in a specific timeline may have misled the congregation. As the first year approached, the prophecy remained unfulfilled. The church, though partially rebuilt, was still far from the vision initially promised. What had started as a source of hope had become a source of skepticism and tension. Members were left asking deeper questions about accountability, the nature of prophetic words, and the practical realities of translating faith into tangible results. And yet, amid all the delays, there remained a persistent core of believers holding on, praying, volunteering, and trusting that the prophecy, even if delayed, had not failed completely. But what happened next? The events in the months following the 1-year mark would shock both the congregation and the wider faith community, raising questions that go far beyond construction delays or logistical errors. As the months stretched past the 4-month mark, the initial excitement surrounding Pastor Keion Henderson's prophecy slowly began to shift. For the congregation, what had once been a source of hope began to feel like a test of patience, faith, and trust. In the pews, members whispered concerns to each other. Questions once unthinkable in the presence of a respected pastor now surfaced. Was the timeline realistic? Did we misunderstand the prophecy? Does this reflect on our faith or the messenger? These were questions that weighed heavily on hearts and minds alike. Outside the church, the situation did not go unnoticed. Social media became a mirror reflecting the congregation's evolving emotions. Posts that initially celebrated Henderson's prophetic words turned into discussions, debates, and, in some corners, criticism. Hashtags referencing the prophecy began to circulate. Some users defended the pastor, arguing that divine timing does not follow human schedules. Others expressed disappointment, frustration, and even disillusionment. Video clips of sermons, fundraising events, and church updates were shared widely, prompting analysis and commentary from online audiences who had never attended the church. The ripple effect extended into the local community as well. Businesses, contractors, and volunteers who had initially supported the rebuilding effort noticed the slow progress. Community members who had placed bets, figuratively speaking, on the rapid restoration now questioned their assumptions. Local journalists began to follow the story more closely, interviewing members and reporting on the stalled reconstruction. Headlines ranged from cautious optimism to subtle skepticism, reflecting the complexity of public perception. For church members, the emotional impact was profound. Some felt their trust had been tested in ways they never imagined. Longtime congregants who had donated time and money wrestled with feelings of disappointment, guilt, and even fear of spiritual misalignment. Others found themselves questioning not only the timeline, but also the authority of prophetic declarations in general. Prayer meetings, once solely filled with praise and hope, began to incorporate discussions about discernment, accountability, and the nature of fulfilled prophecy. The social media aspect added an entirely new layer of pressure. Videos and posts went viral, drawing commentary from believers and skeptics alike. While many showed support and empathy for Henderson and his congregation, others criticized what they saw as a miscalculation or overconfidence. Influencers and faith commentators dissected the prophecy, debating whether a prophetic word should be interpreted literally, symbolically, or as a test of faith. The congregation was thrust into a public spotlight that no prophecy could have predicted. Amid the scrutiny, a significant divide emerged within the congregation itself. Some members doubled down on faith, viewing the delay as a spiritual test designed to strengthen patience, endurance, and trust in divine timing. Others struggled to reconcile the missed timeline with their expectations, feeling hurt, frustrated, or even misled. Community forums, group chats, and private discussions reflected this tension, painting a picture of a congregation grappling with complex emotions: hope, doubt, trust, disappointment, and perseverance. Yet, despite the criticism and internal debate, there were stories of resilience. Volunteers continued to contribute time and effort. Members continued to pray fervently. Local contractors who faced challenges with permits, weather, and logistics still committed to the rebuilding effort. The prophecy, while delayed, became a catalyst for deeper reflection on faith, leadership, and the interplay between divine expectation and human action. And just when it seemed the congregation was beginning to accept delays as part of the process, new information surfaced. Insider reports about logistical challenges, funding discrepancies, and unforeseen construction setbacks that the public had not fully understood. These revelations added both context and complication, reshaping the narrative yet again. The prophecy had not failed because of lack of faith, but perhaps due to factors that were never accounted for when the words were first spoken. But what happened in the following months, as a full year passed and the church remained partially rebuilt, would ignite conversations that went far beyond construction setbacks. It raised critical questions about spiritual accountability, leadership responsibility, and the real-world consequences of public prophecy. This story was no longer just about a building. It was about trust, expectation, and the fine line between hope and disillusionment. As the story unfolded over the course of a year, it became clear that the delay in fulfilling Pastor Keion Henderson's prophecy was not simply a matter of spiritual timing. Multiple factors, both practical and human, converged to create a reality far different from the vision that had been publicly proclaimed. To fully understand what went wrong, we need to examine the situation from several angles: leadership, logistics, funding, and the complex dynamics between prophecy and expectation. First, let's look at leadership and decision-making. Pastor Henderson, like many high-profile spiritual leaders, is tasked with balancing faith, vision, and operational reality. Delivering a prophetic word carries enormous weight. It inspires, motivates, and sometimes pressures a community into action. Yet, translating that prophecy into tangible results requires careful planning, consistent communication, and contingency measures. Insider sources suggest that while the pastor's heart was in the right place, the practical planning for reconstruction may have underestimated regulatory hurdles, contractor delays, and resource limitations. Next, funding played a critical role. Large-scale church reconstruction is expensive, requiring donations, grants, and logistical support. While the congregation rallied and gave generously, reports indicate that the financial projections initially assumed an ideal scenario, one in which funds would flow steadily and without interruption. Unexpected costs, administrative fees, and unforeseen construction challenges created gaps that slowed progress. These realities highlight a fundamental tension. Faith can inspire generosity, but even divine vision cannot eliminate the practical limitations of human systems. Insider perspectives also point to the challenges of managing public perception. With the prophecy broadcasted widely, both in the church and on social media, expectations were magnified. Every delay, every slow week became amplified through online commentary and public scrutiny. The pressure to demonstrate progress added stress to leadership and volunteers alike. In some ways, the prophecy itself became a double-edged sword, inspiring faith but creating a public benchmark that was difficult to meet, especially amid logistical challenges beyond anyone's immediate control. Another layer to consider is the spiritual interpretation of prophecy. Experts in theology and prophetic ministry often emphasize that prophetic words are not always literal. They can serve as guidance, encouragement, or even tests of faith. In this case, the clear timeline of 4 months may have been intended to inspire urgency and trust rather than act as a literal deadline. Nevertheless, for many members, the literal expectation was deeply ingrained, leading to frustration when reality diverged from the spoken word. The human element cannot be ignored. Construction teams faced delays due to permits, supply shortages, and weather conditions that were unpredictable. Volunteers had to balance church rebuilding with work, family, and personal obligations. Even with the best intentions, human limitations played a role in extending the timeline far beyond the 4 months initially promised. These factors, when combined with the public nature of the prophecy, created a perfect storm of challenges that no single person, not even a pastor, with profound spiritual authority, could control entirely. Finally, there is the emotional and spiritual impact on the congregation. The delay forced members to wrestle with the reality of unfulfilled promises, testing the depth of their faith, patience, and resilience. Conversations that once centered on hope began to include doubt, and while many remained committed, others questioned the interpretation and accuracy of prophetic declarations. This situation underscores a critical lesson. Faith in divine promises is deeply personal, but when those promises intersect with human plans and public expectations, accountability, communication, and understanding become essential. The story of Pastor Keion Henderson's prophecy is, therefore, not simply a tale of a word that did not come to pass. It is a complex narrative that intertwines faith, leadership, human limitations, and the unpredictable nature of life. And as we approach the next chapter of this story, we will see that even in delays and challenges, there are lessons for believers, leaders, and anyone navigating the delicate balance between vision and reality. But what happened as the second year approached, and how the congregation responded to these lingering challenges, would reveal truths that no one could have anticipated, pushing faith, accountability, and understanding to their limits. As we reflect on the full year that has passed since Pastor Keion Henderson's prophecy regarding the rebuilding of the church after Hurricane Beryl, the story becomes less about delays and more about the broader lessons it offers to the congregation, the leadership, and anyone who follows prophetic guidance in the modern faith community. One of the first and most important lessons is the intersection of faith and human responsibility. Prophetic words, especially those delivered publicly with specificity, carry incredible weight. They inspire, they mobilize, and they instill hope. Yet faith does not absolve humans from the practical responsibilities that accompany such visions. Construction must be managed, funding must be secured, volunteers coordinated, and unforeseen obstacles addressed. In this story, the prophecy ignited hope, but also revealed how easily logistical and human factors can challenge even the most carefully spoken words. Secondly, the story highlights the delicate balance between expectation and interpretation. A prophecy can be interpreted literally or symbolically, depending on context, tradition, and spiritual discernment. In Henderson's case, many congregants embraced a literal interpretation, expecting 4 months and a complete rebuild. When reality diverged from expectation, disappointment was natural. The key takeaway here is the need for guidance, transparency, and communication from leadership. Congregations thrive when they understand not only the spiritual promise, but also the practical roadmap to fulfillment. Another critical reflection concerns accountability and transparency. Leaders like Pastor Henderson carry significant authority and influence. When their words are made public, the congregation, community, and even wider audiences hold them accountable, whether consciously or subconsciously. In this situation, delays and unfulfilled timelines inevitably sparked questions. Insider reports about logistical challenges, funding gaps, and construction setbacks provided context, but the initial lack of public communication about these challenges amplified scrutiny. This demonstrates the importance of maintaining honesty and clarity in leadership, especially when prophetic words intersect with tangible actions. The emotional journey of the congregation is another layer worth exploring. Faith, after all, is not only tested in miraculous moments of fulfillment, but also in seasons of waiting, patience, and uncertainty. The unfulfilled prophecy challenged members to grapple with doubt, reassess trust, and refine their understanding of spiritual leadership. For some, faith was shaken. For others, it deepened as they learned to differentiate between the messenger and the message. This dynamic underscores that spiritual growth often occurs not only in moments of success, but also in moments of challenge, testing, and introspection. Beyond the immediate congregation, this story serves as a cautionary tale for the broader faith community. It reminds both leaders and followers that prophetic words carry power and responsibility, but also that context, logistics, and timing matter immensely. Spiritual leaders are tasked not only with delivering divine insight, but also with guiding their communities through practical realities. When these elements are balanced thoughtfully, faith can inspire action without fostering unrealistic expectations. Finally, there is hope embedded in this narrative. Hope that the rebuilding will eventually be completed, that lessons learned will strengthen both leadership and congregation, and that the journey itself provides opportunities for reflection, growth, and unity. Even when a prophecy does not unfold on a human timeline, the principles of perseverance, trust, and accountability remain central. Congregants continue to volunteer, support one another, and engage with the vision, demonstrating that faith endures even when promises face delays. In conclusion, the story of Pastor Keion Henderson's prophecy is multidimensional. It is about faith and delay, leadership and accountability, hope and human limitation. It reminds us that spiritual words are powerful, but their fulfillment requires collaboration, communication, and patience. And perhaps most importantly, it teaches that moments of unfulfilled expectation can become lessons in discernment, resilience, and deeper understanding.